Thank you so much. I had the pleasure of visiting with Gayatri yesterday and we caught up and got to know each other a little bit more. So I'm excited about everything that you have to share today. And so, with that in mind, we'll go ahead and jump right in. Does that sound good to you, Gayatri?
That sounds great. And Rachel, it's good to see you again.
Yes, you as well. So yesterday, I just got to express how big of a fan I am of e.l.f. Beauty and all of your accomplishments over the years. I cannot believe that you're a 16-year-old brand when you feel so new and fresh. I know
Mhm.
words that we talked about yesterday was being a renegade brand, and you had some really incredible stories about how you've evolved with the 6 years that you've been with the company. So impressive. So I would love for you just to share a little bit about that, about how the brand has evolved and continued to be that disruptor, but also in connecting with Gen Z and staying relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll just start by sharing is, e.l.f., we were founded in 2004. So to your point, we are a 16-year-old brand, but in many ways it feels like we have just bursted onto the scene. e.l.f. started as that OG digital disruptor. So our founders had this crazy idea of selling $1 premium cosmetics at, over the internet. And when I think about, if I fast forward to where e.l.f. is today, we are in over 25,000 points of distribution. We are the number 5 mass brand within the category. We are a Gen Z favorite. We're crushing the competition. So I think what is interesting to your point is just thinking through what have been the points of evolution for the brand. And for me, I think the biggest inflection point for the brand for us really happened in 2019. And the way we talk about it internally is we talk about how we woke the e.l.f. up. There were just so many things that we were doing as a brand up until that point that were working very hard for us. But I think what we realized in 2019 is those were no longer enough. That wasn't sufficient. So we had to figure out what more we could do and how could we actually evolve. One of the, I think, biggest unlocks for us as a brand is we actually took the time to invest in the fundamentals of the brand. So for us, we did a brand recharge, and I think the idea of sort of pausing for a moment and actually investing in strategy, it never sounds sexy, but I just have to tell you, when I look, at the last 2 years, the work that we invested in 2019 has just been hugely enabling for the brand, and it has just unleashed so much. So some of the specifics that we did, we unleashed a refreshed brand expression. So a lot of it was just getting very clear on who our consumer is. We came out of this declaring very loudly that we are for every eye, lip, and face, which I think was a little bit controversial at the time. I think a lot of people were saying, how can you stand for everyone? But I think as we really looked at who we attract as a brand, that just felt so right for sort of who e.l.f. is. The other piece of work that we did was it was really looking and listening at our consumer. We've always said that e.l.f. is of the people, by the people, for the people. So a lot of what inspired the work that we did was listening to our consumers and really understanding, what are the themes that are going to resonate with them, and then how do we take their love for the brand and just reimagine that in a way that is fresh and distinctive, and modern. And so one of the things, Rachel, you and I were joking about yesterday were our elfisms. So we created this lexicon. This was part of what we did with our brand work, where we took these everyday phrases and we added an elf twist. So things like elfing amazing, elf confidence, why the elf not? All of these have become so core to how we talk about the brand, and our consumers have really latched onto it. So if I were really to boil it down, I think the work that we've done and the evolution that we've done with the brand has really been staying true to the roots of the brand, but really diving into the richness of the brand and figuring out how to bring back that addictive emotional charge. And that's a lot of the work that we've done, or a lot of the work that we did and the fundamentals that we laid down in 2019 that I think have really served us in the last year and a half. So it's been fun. It's been a fun journey.
I love that. That really is elfing amazing.
Yes.
And I love you guys created the elfisms, just, probably what that does to energize you as a team. And then also it spreads throughout to your consumers and shoppers. And that really just is energizing.
Hmm.
And speaking of that, we talked a little bit yesterday about how you've really broken through all the barriers, especially on TikTok,
Yeah.
an OG, if you will. And
Mhm.
so, really, in October of 2019, making your debut, share a little bit about that and how that's helped to transform and reach Gen Z on a platform that's so very familiar with Gen Z audience.
Yeah, no, TikTok is honestly one of my favorite stories to tell. So to your point, we were an early disruptor on TikTok. So we got onto TikTok in October of 2019. Getting on TikTok really was not by accident. So for us, it was about following the data. We knew that we wanted to galvanize Gen Z. We knew that Gen Z were playing on TikTok. We had just come off of our brand recharge and made this declaration that e.l.f. is for every eye, lip, and face. So part of our thinking was, how can we put a megaphone behind that and do it in a way that's going to be truly platform native to TikTok? So what we ended up doing is we did something that no one has ever done before. We created this original music composition called Eyes, Lips, Face. And we put a hashtag challenge behind that and set that off in, towards the end of 2019. And what was interesting there is we approached TikTok with no preconceived notions around what it would take to succeed on that platform. So for us, it was really wanting to think about how can we come up with something that is true to the brand, but fits TikTok like a glove. I think one of the things TikTok was saying, I think what they were used to seeing is a lot of brands tapping into popular music. And I think the piece that we were, thinking that let's just challenge and see how it goes is coming up with our own music composition. So we launched this. We had this bold ambition that we were going to exceed 1 billion views, which at the time sounded completely nuts. And when we set this off, we found out that in a couple of days, this went completely viral. So if we look at what has happened now, there are over 7 billion people that have viewed Eyes Lips Face. It started, I mean, there were so many celebrities who just organically jumped on this. And so I think it really speaks to something that we were able to tap into really successfully, which was a cultural moment and really converting what we thought was going to be a campaign into a movement and then figuring out how to continue to fuel and fuel and fuel that. So over 7 billion people viewed it. We also saw that over 1.5 million people created videos using that sound. And so it was just really, I would say, exciting to see the success of that. And I think one of the things that we continue to do is we continue to lean into TikTok. We've continued to lean into music. And when I think about the evolution, what did that success on TikTok actually teach us, and sort of what did we learn from that? And there are a few things that I know, Rachel, you and I were talking about yesterday, but one of the biggest headlines is this idea of just playing way bigger than who you are, and this idea of just transcending beauty. And I think what's funny in retrospect is we look back at what we did, and a lot of people look at that and they're just thinking, what right does e.l.f. have to play in music? I mean, beauty has nothing to do with music. And for us, I think what we've recognized is in order to connect with Gen Z and to really grab their attention in a very authentic way, we have to figure out how to think outside of the box and the category that we exist in, and do that over and over and over again. And I would say the second piece that we continue to bring in is this idea of first evers. So I think just having the boldness and conviction to do things that have never been done before, see how that performs. And I think as soon as we feel like there's a spark that is being sort of caught on, it's what is that fuel that we can put behind it to turn it into a forest fire. And that was one of the things that I think we did really well with TikTok. And then we just continue to take that mentality and apply it, as we build our strategies going forward.
I love that. Yeah, here at GroundTruth, being a location-based, performance-driven digital marketing company, I can totally relate with this, especially this last year and the pandemic, really putting consumer needs and thinking about your shoppers and what their needs are at the forefront of your decisions and your innovation and all of the ways that you're pivoting within your company. I
Mhm.
loved many things that you had to say with that, but I want to hear a little bit more about how this year has impacted you all at e.l.f., especially with the pandemic.
Yeah. I would say that one of the I would say the specialness of e.l.f. is we talk about, and this I'll just bring up another e.l.fism. We talk about e.l.f. speed. And e.l.f. speed is a level of sort of operating and agility and comfort with pivoting that I have just never experienced in any other organization. So it's truly credit to just the team and the culture that we've built inside this organization. And I think that was particularly important as we think about the world events that have happened in the last year and a half. I think what was fortunate for us is we entered 2020. So before we knew the pandemic was happening, we did enter 2020 from a position of strength. And that was because of the brand work and the fundamentals that we laid down in 2019. But as I look at what has happened over the last year and a half, a lot of it, while we've been very agile, and it's been figuring out what are those points that we have to accelerate, what are the points that we have to pivot on, it's still been remaining very true to who we are. So if I think about things like innovation, a lot of our peers within the category have backed off of innovation during this period. We have completely leaned in. And it's because our consumers are telling us that they want this. They want us to continue to lean in. So we have not sort of let our foot off the gas in the last year and a half. I think the other piece has been around purpose. So, e.l.f. has just inherently always been a purpose-driven company. But when I think about places that we've wrapped more rigor around in the last year and a half, purpose has been one of them as well. So one of the things that we've really codified for the organization and really built the narrative around to energize the organization and energize our partners and also energize our consumers is this idea that e.l.f. stands with every eye, lip, face, and paw. We had to add that paw in there. And I think, what we've done in the last year and a half is really taking the elements of what that actually means. This idea of standing for self-expression, the idea of standing for empowerment, the idea of standing for ethics, and building that with so much authenticity and intention in the way that we market and the way that we respond to what's happening within world events. So, when I think about if I think about maybe a singular area that we've really accelerated over the last year and a half, I would say purpose is one of them. But it didn't come from nowhere. It was completely rooted in who e.l.f. is as a brand. And really the work that we did again was just around codifying how we want to talk about it, so that as we get the entire organization to move around this and rally around this, and our ability to rally our consumers around it becomes a lot more effective if we're able to sort of build that framework, and sort of move everyone in the same direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And also just being an avid consumer myself, knowing that your products, that they really stand for quality, and the price point being very affordable for all families, whether you're Gen
Yeah.
Z or millennial or family or whatever your budget is. So I absolutely love that. And then along with this year, we've seen so many trends that have really ticked up over the past year, from homemade bread to DIY. Skincare routines really seems to have found a newfound passion, if you will, for many.
Hmm.
How has e.l.f. Beauty sales reflected that? And then also, how is that shaping future products?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I have to reactivate the lights. Okay, there we go. So what I will say is when we look at what consumers are focused on and where we've seen the acceleration within beauty, skincare is definitely an area there. The context for e.l.f. is, we launched into skincare 6 years ago. So in 2015, we launched into this adjacency. So skincare is we're not as developed in skincare as we are with the rest of color, but we're also not new to skincare. And the other piece with skincare is the same fundamentals of delivering prestige quality at this drop price is what we're doing with skincare. And to what you were just saying, Rachel, that is exactly this idea of elfing amazing. Like, that is the emotion that we're trying to harness with every single product that we drop, which is you cannot believe the quality that you're experiencing for the price that we're delivering it at. When I think about sort of how what we're seeing from a consumer angle, so a lot of the trends that we're seeing that we think are going to stick post the pandemic would be things like skinimalism, this idea of streamlining regimens, the idea of keeping things simple. And so as we're looking at all of that, all of those pieces are absolutely being baked in as we continue to innovate and really respond to what we know that our consumers are asking for.
Yes. Oh, I can definitely relate too, with wanting to simplify your routine and being able to get the greatest benefit for your time. So absolutely. So considering our audience for a minute, most brands today are facing many more challenges than opportunities due to the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. And we spoke a little bit about price point, and I know that you hinted to that as well. What advice do you have for brands and marketers that aren't as well positioned to succeed in today's economy?
Yeah, for sure. I think when I reflect on just even our journey, and I think the moment of reset for us was in 2018, 2019. And it wasn't exactly what we're experiencing in the world right now, but there was the other effect of beauty was becoming oversaturated, and that was impacting what our overall trends look like. And so when I think about how we came out of that and what that, what I can share with other brands and some of the fundamentals that we learned, the first thing is you absolutely have to be clear on who your consumer is and what you stand for as a brand. And if that clarity does not exist within the organization, you have to put the rigor around articulating that. And because when I think about, I go back to the word inflection point. When I think about the inflection point for e.l.f., really being clear on those fundamentals, it completely re-energized the organization, our consumer base, and our partners. So that would be the first piece of advice. If you don't feel like that is absolutely clear within the organization, you have to invest in getting that to a point of clarity. The second thing I would say is just this idea that, have the courage to evolve. e.l.f. has had these points of evolution. We have never overhauled the brand. So we've always remained absolutely true to our roots. But I think one of the things that we recognized back in 2018, 2019 is we had so many superpowers as a brand, but those weren't all sufficient. So we had to figure out how to go out and add more. So I would just encourage everyone to do that reflection and really just be honest around where do the gaps exist. And once you have clarity on where those gaps are, you're going to know how to fill, you'll be able to figure out how to fill those voids. The other related piece to that is around partnership. So, what I will say is we have been really successful in building this orbit of incredible partners that surround this brand. And I think that part of that goes back to the reflection piece of where do we truly feel like we have the expertise and where do we need to bring in the expertise to accelerate and take the brand into spaces that we've never been before. So even, I would say look inside your organization as you're thinking about evolving, but also look outside of the organization as you're thinking about how can you augment your superpowers or even add more superpowers as you're trying to take your brand to different directions. The final thing, and I have to drop another e.l.fism, is be e.l.fing disruptive. It's this piece of like, you have to tout a renegade spirit. And as leaders within the organization, just know that mentality is going to fuel your culture. And I think what comes with that is you have to make bold declarations. The statement that we made internally around we're going to exceed 1 billion views within we had no idea how this was going to perform, but just having the conviction to say that this is what we're going to aim for and let's see what happens. And then putting the action behind that to drive change is hugely important. And then I would just say, just remember that success is very messy. None of it is ever linear. And so I think if you can just bake that into your mindset or anyone's mindset as you're trying to figure out how to accelerate and advance your brand, I think you can sort of think about how to get your brand to a different place than where it currently might be.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I also feel like just the point of keeping the consumer and what they're saying and their voice and having that drive and fuel innovation, like we've spoke about before, is such an important key. I know at GroundTruth last year with digital innovation, that was at the forefront. What problems are our clients facing or our consumers, and how can we jump in to pivot and solve those, or how can
It
we
has to start there. Yeah.
relate with
Yeah.
them and meet them where they're at. And so
hmm
yeah, absolutely. I love that. We're getting ready to go into questions. So for those of you out there, feel free to go ahead and put questions into the chat, and then we'll talk through just a couple things because I want to build onto the innovations and the partnerships that you've had, especially your most recent one with Chipotle, which was amazing. I think it's sold out in 11 minutes or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
So share a little bit about how that came together and how it's kind of shaped what you're thinking about for the future in terms of partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it goes back to one of the key takeaways that I mentioned around TikTok, which is this piece of how do we as a beauty brand transcend beauty? So when I think about Chipotle and the partnership there wasn't a lot of there was not a lot of thinking on the outset. I think we literally looked at Chipotle and we said, how do we bring two brands together that are disruptive within their industries? How do we then, we also saw everything that Chipotle was doing on TikTok. So Chipotle was disrupting on TikTok, e.l.f. was disrupting on TikTok. We knew that both brands knew how to authentically connect with Gen Z. And so the idea of working alongside a brand that had the similar values and had that like-minded spirit was something that really excited us. So we came together and it was really interesting. It was just before the pandemic. So in March of last year, before the shutdown, our team, we flew to LA and we met the Chipotle team. And it was sort of instant in terms of the connection and the like-minded ways of operating. Chipotle, they operate with a very similar level of boldness, with unexpectedness. Both of us, I think, just had this equal commitment, and this was truly a joint collaboration around how can we pour our joint marketing muscle behind this idea to drop something in the market that everyone is going to completely freak out about. So, I would say that there wasn't, when I think about how we got there, it's really about thinking through the unexpected. It's this idea of how do you take your brand into places that you've never been before, and then who are the partners that you can work with that have that like-minded renegade spirit, where when you bring the teams together, you know that you're going to come up with something that neither brand could necessarily do individually, but collectively, it's going to absolutely break the internet, which is what we saw with this collaboration.
Yes. Yeah. That was an incredible synergy that the two of you both brought together. And also, just in speaking marketing to Gen Z, Chipotle has been a standout brand for being able to reach Gen Z. And just like you mentioned, being able to look at what you stand for and what you're achieving, and be able to look out and say, okay, this brand is a similar brand that has values, it's disrupting the same way, and then seeking out that partnership. So smart.
Totally.
So we haven't had any questions come in yet, but everyone out there listening, please feel free to go ahead and do that, and we'll get to your questions. But until then, we've got a few more questions that we can go through here. Given all the changes and shifts that happened this last year, what are your predictions for the industry in 2021?
Um, so let's see. So I think a couple of predictions. I would say one, to no surprise, TikTok is going to be very influential within beauty. So I would say for the brands out there that haven't experimented with TikTok, I would, download the app, get inside of it. When I think about the future of where things are headed and how consumers are shopping, and what their influences are, there's so much that is coming together within that platform. So take the plunge, and start experimenting. So that would be the first thing. The second thing, is around what we know with Gen Z, but I think just to bring it to the forefront, Gen Z, they are continuing now more than ever to look for brands that actually stand for something. And I think it's, this can't be, there have been a lot of discussions around authenticity versus, taking performative actions. And one of the things, as you think about a brand and what you want to stand for as a brand and what that purpose driven mission is it absolutely has to be rooted in something that is authentic. And so with e.l.f., I think these pieces that we've identified, these spaces that we've carved out for ourselves around standing for self-expression, standing for empowerment, standing for ethics, which would include something like cruelty-free, all of this is so linked in the legacy of this brand. But I think the work that we've done over the last couple of years is how do we take those elements and really bring it to the forefront of how we connect with consumers and market to consumers. The other trend, and this is really to no surprise, is really is around digital and the shifts that have completely happened, from the physical to digital spaces as consumers are shopping and transacting. And so I think this piece of really building up your digital leadership, cracking personalization, figuring out how to speak to consumers and find consumers where they are in the way that they want to be spoken to is absolutely essential. So, if I were to boil it down, I would say that all of these things I think have always been in brands' minds, but I think the last year and a half has really put a spotlight in elevating the importance of these things if you want to succeed as a brand and connect with Gen Z in a really authentic way.
Oh, yes, that's a great response, and couldn't agree with you more. I know one thing we didn't get a chance to speak about that we spoke about yesterday for quite a bit was, with the shift in digital and trying to speak that consumer or shopper language and reach them where they're at, has been the rise of gamers and being
Hmm.
home and shelter in place and those types of things, and the communities that have been built. And I know that e.l.f. has done an incredible job at being able to kind of break into that type of community. So can you
Hmm.
share a little bit more about that? Because I was just so excited about the things that you guys are doing.
Yeah. And I think with everything that we're doing on gaming, the fundamentals are still the same, which is where are consumers playing and how do we go play where consumers are? And how do we continue to just throw our brand in orbits where we've never existed before, but do it in a way that is super authentic to the brand and to the platform that we're on. So when I think about our entry into gaming, it started with a partnership with Loserfruit. Lufu is her gaming name. She is the #2 female gamer on Twitch. There's also this piece of total values alignment. So as we think about the collaborations and who we really connect with, because most of the collaborations that we build have, it's not one and done. There's always sort of a sustaining aspect to the partnerships that we're creating, and Lufu is no exception to that. I think what we love about her is what she stands for. So she is like this badass female gamer in a space that is pretty male dominated.
Yes.
And she's unapologetic about that. And so, beyond, there are a couple of areas that we're partnering with her on. One is she's creating for both males and females engaging platform native content that encourages self-expression and that talks about the e.l.f. products that she loves using. So that's one angle that we're taking with her. The other angle is going to be more purpose-driven, and it's back to bringing together the joint value that we have around empowerment and using our collective platforms to really lift up female gamers in a space that I would say they're having a huge impact in, but historically have not dominated. So we're going to continue to partner with her. We're going to continue to crack live streaming, but the fundamentals in terms of how we got into that space, I would say, follow the same themes in terms of how we got to TikTok and even how we got to Chipotle.
Yes, I love that. Not dominating yet, right?
Yes,
Uh,
we're almost there.
that's right. I love it. We had a few questions come in. I love this question. How have you been able to build relationships with your colleagues and new hires during this time? That's such a great question because I know that for myself, growing a team during this time has been a challenge. I'd love to hear from you first, Gayatri, how you've done that, and then I can share a few things about my team as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think one of the biggest things that, and it's actually interesting to see the evolution of what's happened inside the organization. So we've had town halls within e.l.f. That happen every other week. The way our town halls actually used to be structured is because e.l.f. is headquartered in Oakland, you'd have, probably 50 people crammed into the boardroom in Oakland. And then we would, through Zoom call, have our New York team and then all of our remote employees join in as well. Since the pandemic, obviously everything has happened remotely. And so all employees jump on Zoom and our town halls, are 100% remote. And interestingly, in talking to Tarang, our CEO, when we think about the things within this company that are not going to change once we return to whether it's a hybrid work model or, fully return into the offices, one of the things is that our town halls are going to always remain 100% remote. And there's a piece of just there's so much energy when you see everyone on a single board within Zoom. So I think part of the pieces have just been what are the practices that we absolutely cannot let go of as we're building connection within the organization? And I would say our town halls is definitely one of them. The other part of it is just the transparency that has always been part of e.l.f. There's so much that's been happening in the world. And I think one of the things that we as a company and as a culture, as an elite and as a leadership team do extremely well is having very transparent conversations with the entire organization around what is happening and how are people feeling about it. And then we often, might scale that back down and, have forums that are a little bit smaller. But I think really prioritizing the ways that we can continue to stay connected as a company has been paramount, and that's really worked for us. And I'm also excited to see the practices that we've built in the last year and a half that are not going to change. I think once things, quote unquote, return to normal, because we've sort of seen in an unexpected way the advantage and sort of the even stronger connection that we've been able to build through some of the practices that have been born out of the result of this period. But Rachel, I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the things that you guys have implemented?
Yeah, at GroundTruth, we've got several employees that have worked remote from the start of the company, and so I think that what we did was took some of the learnings of how they've developed relationships and applied that across the organization. We've got town hall meetings as well, where you've got the energy of being able to see everyone's faces, but then we also offer things like coffee chats, where you can
Totally.
randomly sign up, and human resources will pair you with someone, and so then you can get to know somebody, even from a different office that works remote, that you wouldn't have normally been able to meet, even if you had a meeting in a particular city. For example, with Ground Truth, we've got an office in India, and it's been
Hmm.
fascinating to be able to be paired with people that are across the globe and learn about how this pandemic has impacted them and get to know them on a personal level. I think that really helps employees also have a sense of belonging. When somebody
Hmm.
else knows you and you are known by somebody else, then you're building that community across all of the network of your company and being able to kind of bring everyone together, even though it is digitally. So I think those are some ways that we've really worked to bring people together. One particular way I'd say with our new hires is that we have developed a buddy system where
Mm,
they're being mentored and paired with several different people across the company, which
love
then
that.
also helps them understand the organization, but then feel like they have someone else they can go to besides just their direct manager. So
Hmm.
those are a few creative ways that have really helped us come together as a team. Any emerging technologies you're looking into for the next few years? That's a great question.
It
Do you want
is.
to take a crack at that?
Yeah. I mean, emerging technology. So, I would say virtual reality, AI, these are all spaces that we are in and continuing to figure out how to advance. But it is all under this theme of as shifts are happening in the way that consumers are engaging with categories, in the way that they're researching brands, in the ways that, so I think part of it is just looking at how the entire consumer journey has shifted as a result of the last year and a half, and then how do we figure out what are the tools and technologies that we can serve up to our consumers to make the choices that they're making as seamless and as easy as possible. So those are areas that we're going to continue, that we have bulked up, and those are areas that we're going to continue to invest in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for Ground Truth being a location based digital advertising company, one of the things that we've all seen is just the rise of cord cutting and being
Mm,
able to reach shoppers and consumers on CTV, OTT, and across all screens. And that is absolutely where Ground Truth wants to help our clients advertise and reach their shoppers and consumers in real time moments. So
mhm.
I think that that's been a way that we're looking to the future. We don't see that trend, suddenly stopping anytime soon, and where we're continuing to evolve.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, we got a really great question for you from an attendee. It says, has e.l.f. thought about the traditional sports space at all? Similar to Loser Fruit being a huge female name in sports, has the brand thought about this at all for WNBA, LPGA,
Mm.
etc.?
Oh, it's a great question. I would say that we're always looking at what are these new frontiers that we can crack. And so, sports is not something that I think we would ever discount. We haven't put a tremendous amount of energy around that right now, but as we think about where do we want to take the brand, where are our consumers, where are some of the where are the conversations happening around beauty, where e.l.f. currently doesn't exist, that's absolutely the frame and the mentality that we apply as we think about where we're going to go next.
Yes. Oh, I love that. We got a great question from somebody in the audience too about the economic mindset. I know that just being economically responsible in terms of the environment and things like that are absolutely at the forefront, probably, of brands like yours. So they asked, how will e.l.f. start to play into circular economy mindset, meaning maybe eventually consumers can return empty products to CVS, Target, etc.,
Mm.
with the intent that e.l.f. will break down and resume these components.
It's yeah, no, that is definitely so. When I think about the where e.l.f. is and where we want to go, so sustainability, we have made a lot of strides as it relates to sustainability. One of the things that we talk about is Project Unicorn, Project Unicorn is the code name that we came up with internally. But the idea behind Project Unicorn was a first step that we could take around packaging reduction and reducing our overall footprint on the environment. So we pretty much stripped away where possible our secondary packaging, and introduced, whether it was loops or ways to still display product within store without overusing packaging. So that's a first step that we've made. I think in terms of going further in partnerships with retailers, we're always thinking about where we can go next. So this would be an area that, admittedly, we're not at the forefront of. But as we see where we want to go as a company, and as we see where the consumer demands are and what the consumer expectations are, I think it is a space that we're continuing to have conversations around to figure out where do we go next, and how do we actually crack it, and is there an opportunity to partner with retailers to make a bigger impact than what we could do on our own.
Absolutely. That's great. And so another question came in. Has e.l.f. thought about doing any in-game advertising with display ads? That's interesting as well.
Hmm. No, for sure. I think and that's where it starts. I think as we think about the frontiers that we want to get into, there's a little bit of what is the first step that we want to take there? What is the response that we're seeing in market to the efforts that we're doing? And how do we lean in further and further and further? So that would absolutely be a natural progression in terms of what we're thinking about with live streaming and Twitch and our overall partnership in gaming. We're very much on that same wavelength.
I love that. Well, we'll definitely be in touch about that.
Yeah.
Hey there.
Hi. No, that was awesome. 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 And thank you guys so much for being here and for engaging in this conversation with us. And I love to hear such accomplished leaders talking about Gen Z.